It's about more than the raw materials or the finished products. This is about giving children the chance to connect with the world. It's about more than finding the fastest routes. This is about fresh water when it's needed most. It's about more than saving time. It's about saving the planet. This is about moving mountains to make sure no one misses practice. It's about planning for every possibility so that anything is possible. It's about more than supply and demand. This is about demanding more from our supply chain. Supply chain professionals have the power to change the world. SAPICS helps make that happen. We provide supply chain professionals with the knowledge and know-how to raise the bar on supply chain excellence. Together, we make a difference.
What's important to me about that video is who makes the difference, and that is supply chain professionals. These are the individuals that run organizations. These are the individuals that define what the standards are for organizations. We don't develop that at SAPICS. What we do is enable individuals. We provide the opportunity for individuals to drive their organizations, to have meaningful careers, and to be able to use supply chain as a force for good. At SAPICS, our focus is on developing individuals. It's not enabling supply chains. It's not focusing on developing the greatest supply chains in the world. That's the individual's responsibility. Our responsibility at SAPICS is to develop the individuals who focus on those supply chain activities. So at SAPICS, we develop people. We develop people at a member level, at a volunteer level, at a staff level. And our focus is to enable those individuals to have rewarding careers in supply chain. This is a very dynamic field. You've heard from a lot of speakers today, not only from Peter, but from Andre, from Professor Bindal, about the impact of supply chain is having on organizations and economies. The focus for SAPICS is to enable those individuals and those organizations to succeed in whatever endeavor they choose. Our focus has always been and started with a body of knowledge for individuals, and we'll continue to focus on that because we believe that supply chains start with people, and the success of supply chain is based on the individuals that drive those supply chains in organizations. Not surprisingly, and I don't have to explain this to you, supply chain has become a strategic imperative for almost every organization. You see it as part of a strategy now, no longer relegated to the back office as an enabling function. It's now a critical differentiator for organizations. And we're seeing the totality of the supply chain or the business environment changing and radical disruption occurring, whether it's from Amazon or other Zappos. Organizations are now finding ways to use supply chain to differentiate themselves and to enable themselves to beat the competition. So we're talking about a function right now that requires individuals at the highest level of the organization with competency to drive organizations, not just functional or technical expertise, but strategic expertise as well. You're looking at supply chains now that cut across almost every aspect of the organization. Only two functions in an organization have to know everything that goes on in the company. Two. The first, finance. Very little goes on in the organization without finance having a role in either the decision or in the final reconciliation of it. The other one is supply chain. Supply chain has to function in every aspect from product design all the way to customer service and returns. There's very little that occurs in an organization without supply chain having a critical role in it. So we're seeing that supply chain, the expectations of individuals driving supply chain has now elevated. Before, it was okay to be technically or functionally expert in an organization. Now, that's the price of entry into an organization. The leaders of the organization now expect those individuals to drive and to be a part of a collaboration within the company to drive their organization to success. Part of the challenge is that we're seeing visibility and transparency of supply chain extend out beyond the company now. We're seeing consumers now starting to talk about supply chain. It wasn't too long ago that couldn't define what supply chain was for organizations or even individuals. I joined SAPICS in 2006. Coming out of consulting, it was an interesting transition. My daughter, 2006, was 11 years old at the time. And so I joined SAPICS and she says, "Dad, what are you going to go do?" I said, "I'm going to go work for a supply chain organization, association." She goes, "What is that?" So I thought hard and I said, if you want to go to the store and you want to buy a loaf of bread, somewhere along the way, somebody had to plan the resources and the raw materials to make the bread, bake it, deliver it, and have it on the shelf for you, available where you need it, when you need it, at the price that you need to pay. Obviously, for an 11-year-old, she's looking at me and she responds, "You make bread?" And I said, "No, we don't make bread." I said, "Let me explain it a different way. You want that doll during the holidays? Well, everybody wants that doll. How many dolls does the company know to make? Where do they ship them? How do they know how to price it? Somewhere along the way, people have to make those decisions to get that doll available for you." And she goes, "You make dolls?" And I said, "All right, let me try again." So I did a couple of more examples, and she finally looked at me, she goes, "Dad, if you don't know what you're talking about, it's okay just to say so." But that reflects part of the challenge that we have about supply chain. It's a very difficult concept to explain to individuals because there isn't one aspect of supply chain, there are many aspects of supply chain. Supply chain is now global, it's very dynamic in its environment. Individuals and organizations now need to talk across cultures, across time zones. Very few supply chains now are located within a concentric local area. And so the demands for individuals in supply chain right now have increased exponentially. And so our understanding of supply chain now has to transcend us, the individuals who run it, to individuals and consumers. And now consumers are starting to drive decisions about supply chain. Whether we're talking about conflict material or we're talking about slave labor or child labor, individuals are now concerned about aspects of supply chain as never before. And their expectation is that we are transparent, that companies are transparent about their supply chains. But yet, we're not there yet. Supply chain is not ubiquitous. It is not easily understood outside of our profession. And so part of the challenge that we have is to increase that knowledge of what supply chain is and the impact that it has on organizations. As we indicated before, it used to be okay that you were technically competent. If you were a subject matter expert, that was enough. That got you the job, it enabled you to have a rewarding career, and you were able to perform in an organization without a whole lot of expectations at the senior leadership level in an organization. It's no longer the case. Expectations now for supply chain professionals indicates that we need a different type of individuals to run a supply chain. Technical expertise is okay. It's a necessary attribute for the individuals, but it's not enough. Individuals in supply chain now are expected to lead organizations. And if you think that there's a difference now in terms of the expectations, take a look at the path to the CEO position today versus 10 or 15 years ago. 10 or 15 years ago, it was always finance or sales where the CEOs came from. Well, what are we starting to see now? We're starting to see CEOs come out of operations management. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, operations guy. Mary Barra, CEO of GM, operations professional. We're starting to see that individuals who are in supply chain are rising to the levels of leadership heretofore unexpected. But yet, are we developing individuals? Do you have the necessary competencies today to lead organizations as well as execute on the technical functions for organizations? This is part of the challenge that we have today, is not only recruiting individuals, but retaining the individuals in supply chain. Let me ask you a question. How many of you knew that you were going to be in a supply chain career when you graduated college? Raise your hand. Two people here. I've asked this question all over the world, and I've gotten the same response. No more than 5% of the individuals knew that supply chain was going to be their career. If you ask accountants, if you ask lawyers, if you ask doctors, they knew that they were going to be in that profession when they went into college and when they graduated college. We don't have that luxury today. We don't have individuals going into school requiring or requesting a career in supply chain or operations management. I've spoken to a lot of universities. Most of the individuals that end up in supply chain find it in their junior year, third year of college. But yet, when you take a look at hiring and salary for individuals in supply chain, second only to engineers in terms of hiring, 95% placement rate for individuals graduating out of operations or supply chain management programs. Starting salaries, second only to engineers. But yet, we can't find enough individuals to to develop our talent pool for the future. Some of the changes that are impacting leadership and some of the changes that are impacting the ability of individuals to lead organizations. This is a result of a work that we did with our board of directors on some future casting in terms of what the impact in supply chain is going to be for the next 10 to 15 years in the organization, so we can prepare our organization for the future. Not surprisingly, you're going to see some stuff that was highlighted by Professor Bindal as well as Andre. First, increasing urban populations, a movement towards large cities. It's going to have a significant impact on supply chains. Secondly, a huge demographic shift. Individuals are living longer, but yet there's a significant pool of young individuals that are also looking for career opportunities. Individuals are staying in their jobs much longer, but yet we need to increase our attraction of individuals into supply chain. Women and the role that they have in the global society in supply chain, specifically on procurement decisions. They are the ones making decisions. They're the ones driving supply chains. And so we need to be keenly aware of not only their buying habits and their patterns, but of their role in supply chain. We'll get into that in a little bit. You heard Peter talk about technology and automation and intelligence. It's becoming a just ubiquitous part of everything that we do in our lives. Data drives everything today. Consumer demand for transparency. It's not going to be too long before consumers expect that when they pull out their cell phone and they scan a barcode, that they know everything about that product. They know the raw materials, they know the manufacture date, they know the delivery, they know everything about that product. If you take a look at a number of organizations today, they're starting to provide information about manufacturing for individuals who are interested in certain aspects of it. So if you're interested in environmental issues, you can go online and see which organizations are top tier performers on environmental concerns. If you're interested in slave labor in terms of preventing your products from entering the supply chain, there are websites that you can go to and see which organizations have effected policies and procedures to limit slave labor within their supply chain. This is becoming a greater part of expectations of the consumer, and this is going to continue. It is not going to decrease as data becomes more available for individuals and transparency from the organizations become available to the consumer. Speed of change, I don't have to talk to you about this. This is, it's impacting everybody. And then lastly, the rise of Africa. Interestingly, we did this back in December. This is when our board of directors and our subject matter experts got together, and the rise of Africa came out from our discussion about critical impact to supply chain in the future. So let's dig into that a little bit. Here you see a quote that African nations have to start to develop their own historical, not only from their historical experiences, but they need to be able to develop their own identity. We talk sometimes about USA, the United States of Africa, that there's a huge opportunity that exists here, but yet there are significant barriers that we have as a multitude of not only individuals but nations trying to come together. There are cultural differences, there are political differences, there are warring factions, there are infrastructure issues that need to be resolved, but yet the opportunity is here. The population is here. The individuals necessary to effect a competitive economy are located already here. It's not, you don't need to go out anywhere else. They're already resident in this economy. But the challenge that we have to develop the necessary workforce and necessary talent continues to be a challenge for not only supply chain, but for other industries as well. When you take a look at what developing economies and how they develop, very few have developed without manufacturing being a key component of their established base. Why is that? Manufacturing is a long-term investment. It is not a short-term investment. For organizations and individuals to invest in manufacturing facilities and necessary infrastructure to support it means that they're willing to risk their finances in the current economy as well as with the current political situations. So if we're talking about long-term investments, Andre was talking about their investments in long-term sustainable projects for manufacturing. This is not a quick return that we're expecting out of organizations. Manufacturing is a long-term investment. To convince organizations to invest in the long term, they need to have a return significant enough to overcome the risks that are inherent in the system. And we're not seeing the manufacturing base starting to develop in Africa the way that it should for a variety of reasons. Infrastructure issues are hampering product from getting from the manufacturing within Africa out to the ports. Ports, there aren't enough ports to develop the necessary infrastructure for logistics. Lastly, the talent pool. We need to start focusing on education. And we're not talking about education at the senior level or at an executive level. I'm talking about education starting from the kindergarten to K through 12 to high school to college and beyond. Education needs to be a cornerstone of the economy as well as the population to enable a strong manufacturing sector. This is just one aspect of it. So when we start to talk about what occurs here and how do we develop a manufacturing base for Africa, you see that it has all the desirable characteristics. You'll see that China has a significant investment in Africa, long-term investment. They're willing to take the risk. The challenge that we have is that we need to enable Africa to be that consolidated, that coordinated activity of production. Andre showed the map of all the various investments that they've made from Nigeria to Kenya to Ethiopia. But yet, there are no infrastructure necessary to develop all those economies and all those geographic regions to be players in a global marketplace, specifically for manufacturing. This has to be overcome. But yet, there's significant interest in Africa, not only today, but the expectation is within the next 5 to 10 years that Africa will become a major power within supply chain and specifically within manufacturing. But yet we need to overcome some of the hurdles and some of the barriers that exist today to enable these organizations and the investment necessary to enable this economy to grow. We talked a little bit before about workforce development. This is a key imperative. It's probably one of the most significant things that hinders or hampers the development of a necessary workforce to develop supply chain for Africa into the future. So you'll see that the United Nations Human Development Index, 38 out of the 46 countries are in Africa in terms of development, out of the lowest. This is a significant challenge that we have in developing the necessary human capital necessary to effect and support supply chains. If supply chains start with people, then we need to focus on the development of those individuals to support supply chain activities within organizations. Education needs to start at the K level, K through 12, as well as high school and moving on to college. We need to have individuals coming to college looking for careers in supply chain. This is a significant challenge that we have. Individuals are not looking at supply chain as a career, albeit when you take a look at hiring and when you take a look at salaries, it is among the highest of any industry right now. So let's talk a little bit before about talent development, not only in Africa, but globally. What are the challenges that we see right now, and what are some of the things that individuals and organizations are doing to overcome it? Here's a study that was done by Manufacturing Institute, and it asked a couple of questions. First, where does your preference of industry rank? And you'll see that manufacturing comes out 5th, behind technology, healthcare, financial, and energy. But yet, when you ask Generation Y, younger individuals, their perception of manufacturing, it drops down to 7. If you think this is a challenge, go to a high school and talk to an individual about manufacturing. Their eyes roll back into the head and they just don't want to talk to you about manufacturing. They view it as shop floor work. They view it as blue-collar work. They don't see the technology. They don't see the robotics. They don't see the challenges of working in a global environment. This perception of manufacturing has to change. And it has to change at the youngest level possible, because it's too late by the time they get into college. We've already lost them. We've got to start training and we've got to start talking about supply chain in a much younger base. We've got to have individuals understand the opportunity that exists in supply chain so that they can not only understand what supply chain means to them as a career opportunity, but the impact supply chain has on the overall economy and the developing individuals and developing nations. This is a huge challenge for us in making the awareness and the understanding of supply chain not only understood, but embraced by individuals, specifically younger individuals. Here's a study that was done by Supply Chain Management World, and it takes a look at the various regions across the globe, and it identifies some of the challenges that organizations have with individuals, specifically on the talent development, as well as retention and development. And you'll see that fairly similar challenges in terms of the various regions across the globe, in terms of hiring and finding and developing talent, fairly similar. And then when you get to the right side of the chart, you'll see some very stark changes here. And that is retaining talent. One of the biggest challenges that organizations face today is retaining talent that they develop. Why is that? Well, we talked a little bit before about the lack of sufficient talent in the marketplace, and that individuals are being hired at 95% out of school. So that means that the demand far exceeds the supply. And when demand far exceeds the supply, that means the cost of individuals and what companies are willing to pay starts to increase. And what are individuals doing? They're getting trained in one organization and they're jumping to other organizations for higher salaries. So we have a lot of organizations saying, well, why would I train them? What's the point? I'm going to lose them. You may. But if you take a look in terms of retention of talent, it's those organizations that focus on talent development, irrespective of economic conditions, irrespective of their performance, that professional development is not a binary switch. You don't turn it on and off. It's a commitment that you need to make to your workers. But yet the workers and the staff need to make a commitment to the organizations as well. It's a two-way street. One of my favorite quotes by Alan Milliken, one of our volunteers. At BASF, he was talking about developing talent in his organization. And one of the questions that was asked of him is, well, what if we certify everybody and they leave? His response was very direct. What if they stay and we don't educate them? That's the challenge that organizations have today. Development of individuals is not an option. I'm often asked, what keeps me up at night? There's one thing, and that's when the next recession hits. And it's not if, when the next recession hits. On average, we've had a recession every 8 years for the last 60 years. And the last one was in 2008. When the next recession hits, have companies learned that you can't turn off professional development and then turn it back on when the economy starts to improve? Have they learned that they need to continue to invest in their talent? What's the one thing every company will tell you is their number one asset? People. Well, if your number one asset is people, if the times are bad, what do you invest in? You invest in your number one asset. You don't invest in your least productive asset, your most productive assets, and that's individuals. And that's what we're looking for individuals as well as organizations, is the commitment to ongoing professional development, not a one-time shot, not let's train everybody and we're done. Ongoing professional development is a commitment that organizations need to make, but individuals need to make that commitment to their organizations to stay with them. If an organization is willing to invest in you, they're willing to keep you. If an organization is willing to poach you from another organization, they're as likely to replace you as well. So our advice to individuals that have organizations that invest in them in their professional development, stay with that company. That's the company that's concerned about you. And they understand their key asset is their employees, and they're willing to invest in that asset. This is a study that was done by Manpower Group in 2015, and they take a look at finding and filling jobs. And you'll see that currently 31% indicate that they're having difficulty filling jobs. Take a look at the slope of this curve. There's a huge increase. Why is that? Well, because the demand for talented individuals has started to increase because the recognition of Africa as a powerhouse in terms of manufacturing or in terms of opportunities for employees is significant, but yet we don't have the talent available for those organizations. What are the top 10 jobs? Not surprisingly, a number of them fit into supply chain. Skilled trades, engineers, management, as well as drivers and technicians. Throw in teachers, because those are the ones that enable individuals to seek out careers. So when you take a look at the job opportunities that exist in terms of the difficulty, you'll see that we have a significant challenge here, but yet we have an opportunity because the talent pool is here. There is enough and sufficient individuals to do these jobs, but yet we need to train them, we need to develop them, and we need to continue to invest in these individuals. We talked a little bit before about technical expertise. It used to be okay. Now companies expect and demand significantly more than just technical expertise. You now have to work across the organization. You now have to be able to explain supply chain to the finance and to the HR people. How many have ever tried to explain supply chain to an HR professional in terms of what the staff that they're looking for? Often it's met with blank stares, and they say, you know what, I'll do the hiring, just find me, just post the job. I'll find the necessary individuals. This is part of the challenge in explaining supply chain across the organization. International exposure. Supply chains are global in nature. Very few supply chains are local in their aspect. And organizational support, we talked about a little bit this before. Professional development. It's an ongoing commitment for individuals as well as organizations. It's not something that you could turn on and off. This is a study that was done by supply chain management, by Gartner, and it compared hiring of individuals. And it went to the employers and they said, what are the skills and the competencies of the individuals that are necessary, and what are the skills that you're seeing from the individuals that you're hiring? So what should they have versus what do they have? Interestingly, we're overweighted in a couple of areas. First, analytics. Not surprisingly, we've all been trained on technical and functional capabilities, so we tend to apply an analytical or a formula or an algorithm to every problem. The second area is supply chain technology. How many have gone through an ERP implementation? How many are still going through that same ERP implementation? It never ends. The technology far exceeds our capacity to utilize it, specifically the individuals. Oftentimes we see organizations implement supply chain technology without training the individuals on how to use it, with the expectation that it's going to increase their performance significantly. Yet it's individuals who run these organizations. It's individuals who run these technology applications. So you see technology far exceeds our capacity of the individual, so we don't need as much right now. Where are we underweighted? That means, what are the demands of employers versus the abilities of the individuals? The first one, problem solving. That's critical thinking. Very underweighted, that the individuals coming and applying for jobs don't have the critical skills necessary in problem solving or critical thinking to be able to discern what the problem is before you apply a solution. So oftentimes, employers are having to re-educate individuals on critical thinking, on enabling individuals to understand what the problem is before applying a solution. Well, if you couple that with the analytics, where we're overweighted, you can see how big of a problem it is. If you can apply an algorithm or a spreadsheet solution to everything and you don't critically evaluate what the problem is, you're going to come to the wrong solution. And so the biggest issue that we have for employers right now is critical thinking. The second area, real-world experience. And this one sort of frustrates me a little bit. Employers expect individuals to come to their company with real-world experience. How are you supposed to get it? You get it from the companies. But yet when you talk to a company about intern programs, or rotational programs, or mentoring programs, they don't have them. Well, how do you get that experience if the companies are not willing to invest in the future for these individuals? So this is an employer responsibility. This is not just an employee responsibility. We're trying to talk to individuals and companies about providing those opportunities. Talk to schools about providing internship programs with companies so that they can see, and organizations can test the individuals and see if they fit for the organizations. This is a dual responsibility. It's not just the individual in this particular aspect. And the last one is global business leadership skills. Supply chain requires individuals to be able to negotiate and understand all aspects of their supply chain, irrespective of what culture, what time zone, or where it's located across the globe. So this is a challenge that we have for individuals, but the opportunity exists. This is a significant opportunity in this marketplace. There's been some discussion about technology being able to replace a lot of the workers. This is a study that was done by MHI, and they indicated that while technology, and specifically in materials handling logistics systems, will start to enhance the capabilities, the expectation is that it's going to continue to require individuals to operate these systems. So this is the leaning, going back on the previous slide, we don't lean on technology as a solution, we use technology with individuals who are knowledgeable about the systems and how to use them. So it's not an either or that technology will replace individuals. The expectation is that individuals need to be more competent in the future to use the technology that's available to them. So the need is to embrace the technological advances, not to shy away from them, but to enable individuals to use them and understand how they can enable their organizations. This is a study that we did with the Manufacturing Institute and Deloitte on diversity in supply chain, and most specifically for women in supply chain. And there's a very big problem that we face right now. Hiring for individuals in organizations right now is about a 50-50. That means when they're hired, you can see a 50-50 balance of male and female within organizations. As a matter of fact, in certain organizations, they're willing to pay more for women because they want to attract them into their organization than they do for men. But yet, individuals staying in supply chain starts to drop, the women start to drop dramatically after 5 to 10 years. Why is that? Because they're not given the same opportunities that men are in terms of job promotions or opportunities to take on additional responsibilities. There's an assumption that the woman needs a different type of opportunity, that they won't accept it, they won't travel, that they have family responsibilities. That's gender bias. Organizations need to modify their rules and responsibilities for individuals based on the capabilities of the individuals. It is not a one-size-fits-all. You'll see that 26% of the respondents indicated that their company's retention efforts were poor or very poor for women. 2/3 of the respondents indicated that performance were not the same for men and women. So if you have different performance standards, you have lower pay for women the longer they stay in the workforce, specifically in supply chain. Is it a surprise that we're not seeing women as leaders in organizations? There are a number of empirical studies that have been done for organizations on return on shareholder value on a diverse management team, and those management teams that have a diversity within male and female outperform their counterparts. It's there for everybody to see. But yet, when you take a look at the individuals responding and the challenges and the opportunities for women, less than 26% of women in management exist in supply chain. 26%. It's not for lack of opportunity, but companies need to change, and they need to be much more family friendly, and they need to be diversity friendly in terms of attracting and retaining women in supply chain. This is a significant challenge that we've taken on as an organization to increase the potential of individuals to awarding careers in supply chain, and specifically for women in supply chain. I'm going to share with you a couple of case studies, and it's interesting because you'd think that these decisions were made at the highest level in the organization. That's not the fact. As a matter of fact, very few times does the C-level look for APICS as an organization for their talent development. Usually it's done at a functional level. Either director or VP of a function sees that there's underperformance or that there's a lack of performance within a specific function. And they reach out and they rarely say, we need APICS. What they do is they call and they say, we have a problem. What solutions do you have for our organization? GE was one of those organizations. This is a facility in Florence, and you can get to see some of their results in a second. But the critical thing for us is that it started with one individual seeking a way to develop his employees. Listen up.
My name is Lorenzo Romagnoli. I'm the materials manager for the turbo machinery and downstream solution working for GE Oil and Gas based in Florence, Italy. Business goal we try to achieve with this program is to really improve our most important global supply chain KPI, inventory, on-time delivery, and inventory turns. We want to introduce EPICS in our company because we wanted to make sure that our people was aware about the fact that going through the EPICS training, they can do the same job in a different way. EPICS can give them the opportunity to have an open eye on what the other companies are doing about materials management processing and practice. They can learn from them, they can understand how they are doing differently, and they can apply in their everyday job.
GE Oil and Gas is working very well in communicating the value of EPICS education. So this comprehensive approach to get better business performances is really successful, and this is the reason why investing in education is bringing so many results.
If you compare where we were and where we are today in terms of capacity utilization, this has been increased by 50%. And this was about managing better our capacity planning and master planning processes. So what this is about? This is about using the same asset, the same plan in Florence, but generating and doubling the output of units in the same year, but not because we double the asset, but just because we better utilize the way we were planning. So when it comes to delivery performance, we went from 63% on time delivery in 2009, and now we are at 95% on time delivery. And this was about improving all the processes that are behind this in terms of material handling, material processes, inventory management.
GE Oil and Gas will expand the program in the next year, involving more participants, expanding it geographically to other plants outside Italy, involving other companies of GE. And this is because the results of the education program are so outstanding.
So actually we already started, expanding the training program to the subsea, the pressure and control kind of divisions, and this is really becoming a global program. The plan for GE Oil and Gas is to continue to leverage EPICS in a global scale and replicating this kind of model in all the other P&Ls.
People attending the program feel that they can enhance their career, they can become more strategic for the success and for the performance of their organization.
Because they found a strong correlation with their everyday job activity as a supply chain professional, with the theory, the practices, and the processes they found in the books and the lessons during the training. So amazingly, this program became from a very skeptical approach from the very beginning and one of the most successful training programs at General Electric Oil and Gas in Florence.
What's interesting about it is that Lorenzo didn't seek corporate approval for the training. He saw this as an opportunity for his organization to develop what he saw was a challenge in terms of their KPIs. So you start to see some of the improvements in their performance for their organization. Lorenzo has now been promoted to global supply chain leader, and he is now responsible to roll out EPICS across all of GE Oil and Gas globally, as well as their subsea systems. Lorenzo started at a small level. He started with one facility in Florence, and the impact that it had on GE was noticed by the corporate leaders of the organization. The CFO had an opportunity to meet with him in Florence, and they said, "How did you do this?" And they just explained to them that they put the individuals through CPIM as well as CSCP training. They've made a commitment to their employees for ongoing professional development. They've made a commitment to their organization that employees were important to them and that they're willing to extend that training to the individuals. From our perspective, it enabled not only Lorenzo to identify and train the individuals, but enable their organization to succeed well beyond their expectation. You saw some of the KPIs. On-time performance from 65 to 95%. They're beating their competition because they trained their workers with the same asset base that they had before. This is not the only study that we have. We have a number of them. Another one is McCormick Spices. They created a collaborative organization where they embedded the training of EPICS within their organization. So if you want to move up in the organization, you need to have EPICS certification. That's a significant commitment to the individuals in their organization, but it's also a commitment to development. This is not just thinking about the individuals. They're thinking about ROI, return on investment. And they understand that ROE, return on education, equals ROI. And they're willing to commit their organization to that education of their employees, knowing that if they have the most capable employees, that they will beat their competition. So you'll see that McCormick also achieved their business goals and significant positive results from the improvements. It's just a couple of case studies. There's a number of others that you can research online on the APICS website. But supply chain transformation occurred because of the employee development, not because of IT. It enabled them, but this was a combined effort for their organization, embedding training throughout their company. We talked a little before about workforce strategies. Education needs to start truly at the kindergarten through the K-12, from kindergarten on through high school. And we need to find ways to enable individuals to not only understand the opportunities that exist in supply chain, but what a rewarding career this could be. This is probably one of the most dynamic fields that is in any industry that we serve right now. Supply chain and the professionals exists in every industry, whether it's healthcare, whether it's retail, whether it's food and beverage, you name it. There are supply chain professionals that enable their organizations. And you'll see some of the activities that we have as an organization to support those individuals. But yet, we're going to push further. We're going to go down to the kindergarten level. And we're going to start investing in training for kindergartners. And you say, well, how can you train for a kindergartner? Well, we can. There's a training program or a simulation game for kindergartners on developing a lemonade stand, on production, on pricing, on volume. We're teaching them things that impact supply chain, but we're not talking about supply chain. We're talking about everyday activities that they do. By the time they get into high school, they'll understand what supply chain is. So this is an investment that APICS is going to make for the next 10 to 15 years. It's not going to pay off in 10 years from now. It's going to pay off maybe 20 years from now. But if we don't fill the pipeline today, we're going to sit here 20 years from now and saying, why don't we have the sufficient employees necessary to drive our supply chain? It's because we didn't invest in them today. And so APICS is willing to make that commitment to individuals and employees and employers to train their workforce. That's our commitment as individuals. We're very proud that we're going to release a new certification on July 1st, and that will be in Certified Logistics, Transportation, and Distribution, CLTD. This is a result of our merger with the American Society of Transportation, ASTNL, and we've been working on this for about the past year. We think this is going to be a significant opportunity for individuals to draw in other professionals inside our tent in terms of supply chain. Our goal, our aspiration was to be the end-to-end supply chain organization. We now have capability, we now have certifications available in almost every aspect of supply chain, save procurement, and we think there are other organizations that do a very credible job on the procurement. Both ISM and SIPS, we believe, do a very credible job. But we believe that we have within the design and plan, the deliver, as well as the manufacturing and the make side, we believe we have the global standard in certifications, and we fully expect our CLTD to join that family of certifications in the marketplace. So talk to SAPICS. This is, by the way, SAPICS by far and away is our most competent partner in the globe. APICS as an organization works through partners. We disseminate our content to our partners, and they use their qualified trainers, and I think SAPICS is among the most qualified trainers in the globe. So seek out SAPICS in terms of the availability of the new certification, and it'll be starting to roll out in July with our first tests in October as to set the standard or the pass rate, with the full exams coming on in the early part of 2017. So what can you do as an employee, as a manager? If you lead your organization, you need to enable individuals. You need to, this is for the individuals. If you're an individual in supply chain, you need to take advantage of this. You need to push your organization for professional development. You need to participate in ongoing education programs. SAPICS has a number of them, a significant number of opportunities for you to engage with individuals networking. The fact that you're here today is a commitment to your ongoing development. That's a significant step for a lot of individuals, is to come to these kinds of conferences, learn from each other. You're the ones who drive supply chains. If you're in management, enable individuals to seek out opportunities for promotion as well as development. Encourage ongoing professional development. Encourage collaboration across the organization. Find ways to develop teams Supply chain is not individual, it is individuals. It is multitude of individuals that comprise the supply chain. So find ways to develop your talent. That bottom line statement there, supply chain leaders aren't born, they are developed. There are significant opportunities for individuals, both at APICS as well as SAPICS, for you to develop your supply chain capabilities. I had the opportunity to Jack Welch present to our conference last year in Las Vegas. And Jack Welch, the guy who always, Iron Jack, the guy who was, focused on up or out. His focus now is on people. It is people first, strategy second. He's focused on the right things. He's committed to developing individuals. We're committed to developing individuals. With that said, this is one of my favorite quotes. This is 2010. It came from the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics. Take a look at this. This is what they were looking for supply chain professionals. Superhuman combination of people with technical depth, business breadth, soft skills to be a leader, an influencer, and a diplomat. Deep subject matter expertise, integrated understanding of broader business imperatives, ability to lead coworkers across countries and across cultures. Who wouldn't want that employee? Everybody wants that employee. By the way, you know who that employee is? That's you. You are these employees. You are the ones that they're describing here. These are supply chain professionals. This is what companies are looking for. And this defines you. You define supply chains. You create the opportunities for organizations to drive their performance. You enable organizations to compete and succeed in the marketplace. If in some way APICS can be a part of that, we're happy to do so. There are opportunities for you to engage with your organization as well as with other networking and other associations. Take advantage of those opportunities. And I wouldn't do my job if I didn't promote our conference that's coming up in Washington in October of this year. I hope you have an opportunity to come and see it. With that, I want to thank you for your time and your attention and continue to develop and continue to engage with APICS. Thank you very much.